don't even know that, you stupid wife.
Mary, my mother-in-law, always calls me a stupid wife. I'm freelance programmer who works from home, so I'm usually at the house. But Mary constantly summons me at her own convenience. Chores at Mary's house, weeding the garden, shopping, carrying bags, being her personal chauffeur. None of these tasks are urgent. It seems she just wants to order me around as she pleases. When we visited her house to announce our engagement, she and my father-in-law John welcomed us so warmly. I thought I wanted to become closer with them, so I decided to live near her place. I never imagined it would turn out like this. Being called by Mary 3 times a week is hindering my work. This could damage my reputation as a freelance programmer. So, after discussing it with my husband Ethan, I got him to agree that after driving her for shopping one last time, I wouldn't have to deal with her anymore. If I can just endure this one last time, I'll be free from this hardship. That's the only reason I've been doing everything she tells me to, but...
Oh, ouch! Ouch!
When I arrived at Mary's house after finishing the shopping, I found her sitting on the ground next to the car. She keeps saying ouch, with no indication of standing up. It seems like she's injured herself somehow.
Hey, stupid wife! Call an ambulance!
Even in this situation, it disgusts me how she calls me stupid wife. No matter what, this woman only knows how to curse at me with foul language. If she's going to say that much, should I really act like a stupid wife then? An ambulance, right? Got it. I'm Emma, 30 years old. Currently, I'm a freelance programmer working from home. I got married this year and live together with my husband Ethan, who's 4 years older than me. Originally, Ethan and I worked at the same company. He was my senior colleague in charge of training me when I joined as a fresh graduate. I thought he was a kind and reliable senior who patiently taught this clueless newbie how to do the job. But at first, I was so focused on learning and managing the work that I didn't think of him as anything more than that. Once I became capable enough to handle some responsibilities, I got the chance to work on a project together with Ethan as part of the same team. As we spent time together racing toward the same goal, I started to strongly sense his kindness and sincerity. At the party celebrating the completion of that project, the distance between me and him rapidly closed. After dating for about 2 years after that, we got married, which brings us to today. When I got married, I quit my company job and became a freelancer. That said, I still get work from my previous company, and I've maintained good relationships with the clients I've dealt with so far, so I've been steadily taking on projects. After getting married, Ethan and I rented an apartment near his parents' home. My own family lives about a 4-hour drive away, so it's not easy to visit them casually. But Ethan's parents' place is close to where we originally lived. When we visited them before the wedding to introduce ourselves, they treated us so well. I had hoped to become even closer with such kind parents, which is why I decided to live nearby. Plus, in talking with John, I discovered we had some unexpected things in common. It turned out that John knew the person in charge at one of my work clients. I love comedy, and it just so happens that John is a fan of the same comedy duo. John holds a high position at the company he works for, but he always interacts with me in a warm, friendly way. There are ways he resembles Ethan, which makes it easy for me to talk with him. Our conversations often get lively. At times like that, I get the feeling that Mary is giving me a sharp look, but no, I must be imagining it. I do intend to maintain a certain level of discretion in our relationship. Or so I thought. But lately Mary has started contacting me a lot. She asks me to do things like pull weeds in the garden, or go to some supermarket that's having a sale on eggs and bring some to her house too. Mary probably thinks that since I'm at home, I have too much time on my hands. I explained that I work from home, but Mary has always stuck to the old ways of doing things and seems to have trouble grasping the concept of remote work in this day and age. She often says, "You're at home all day, aren't you?" Even though I'm at home, I set work hours just like when I was employed at a company, and during that time I focus intently on getting my work done. If I'm in danger of missing a deadline, I have to work at night too, just like overtime. When multiple projects pile up, it gets hectic. So it's a real problem when she suddenly says things like,
"Come pick up some vegetables at my place right now."
I've explained many times that I'm working the same as if I were going to an office, and I've declined. But it's as if she's not even listening to what I say. She keeps saying the same things every time, and the frequency of her calls is only increasing. Maybe she's getting desperate because I'm not doing what she tells me to. But I want to do my job properly too. As a freelancer, that's what my reputation hinges on. However, Mary wasn't about to give up so easily. When I refused, she started barging into my home with her tea-drinking friends from the neighborhood in tow.
"You never come over, so I brought these to you. Look, I brought all these vegetables. They're wilting a bit since you never come to get them, but you can still eat them, right?"
Saying this, she dumps a huge pile of half-rotten vegetables at the entrance and lingers there chatting endlessly with the others.
"You say you have work, but isn't taking care of the house also a daughter-in-law's job?" Young people these days just don't understand the importance of maintaining relationships. Not cherishing your mother-in-law is no different from being an ungrateful child. Is this what harassment by a mother-in-law looks like? How frightening. Even if you say you're busy, surely you can spare some time to show your face? What's the point of living so close if you don't even visit? Humph. She must look down on us. Young people these days are so difficult. 4 or 5 neighborhood ladies stand at the entrance of my home with the door wide open, incessantly screeching like this. I don't know what kind of story Mary told her friends, but having my time wasted like this and being spoken ill of so one-sidedly is more than I can bear. If I had to summarize what these ladies are saying, it basically amounts to do as what she says. In other words, if I don't obey her, this scene will keep repeating itself in the future. I guess I have no choice if I want to avoid trouble. Any work I can't finish, I'll just have to take care of late at night. Steeling myself, I decided to go along with Mary's errands to a certain extent. However, I soon came to regret that decision, realizing it may have been a mistake. Being suddenly summoned with a "Come over to my house" became the norm. She would show up at my place saying, "I made some side dishes for you." Then open my fridge without permission, noisily look around my house, and complain, "Make sure to clean properly, it's filthy." I would also get called over to Mary's house and be made to pull weeds in the garden, do dishes, and clean her home. Furthermore, since Mary doesn't have a driver's license, she would constantly call me to bring the car and use me as her personal taxi. The destinations varied, from nearby supermarkets to distant shopping malls. Mary would get in the car and simply state the destination. Of course, there were times it was somewhere I didn't know or had never been before. I would ask where it was located or which direction to head in, but "You don't even know that, you stupid wife."
She would just hurl insults like that without actually telling me. Left with no other option, I would look it up myself or input it into the car's GPS. When we went shopping like this, she would always buy massive amounts, and I would be ordered to carry her bags. John probably earns a lot, and with just the two of them, they can likely afford to shop that much. But there are plenty of rather expensive pieces of jewelry and things that make me wonder, do you really need that? I think she probably intends to show off to me too.
If you don't have proper things like these, it's clear you have no class. A stupid wife like you wouldn't understand.
She says stuff like that to me all the time. Even though she drags me along to shop with her every single time, she's never once said thank you or given me anything. It's not that I want things like that from her, not at all. I just think it's simply harassment towards me, nothing more. I want to quit this role that has no meaning and is only a loss for me, but I'm sure if I refuse, that gang of neighborhood ladies will come barging in again. I was struggling to figure out what to do when Ethan, who had just come home from work, said this to me while we were having dinner together.
Emma, you've been working a lot lately on weekends and at night too, right? Are you swamped with projects or something? It's because your mom has been ordering me around 3 times a week on weekdays. Huh?
I couldn't take it anymore. I must have been tired too. I got irritated, wondering who he thought was to blame.
For a while now, she's been telling me to do things like clean the yard and come pick vegetables, you know. Wait, you mean my mom has been telling you to do that? Yeah. Even when I say I can't go because I have work, she won't listen. She brings her lady friends over to our house and they complain loudly, saying things like it's a harassment. Every single time, she jerks me around saying bring the car now, and even makes me carry her bags. I can't get any work done during the day.
I told him all about Mary's misdeeds, but Ethan had a doubtful expression. Well, that might be understandable. Because in front of John and Ethan, Mary is the very picture of a good wife, wise mother. Just like the ideal image of a wife from the old days, she devotes herself to her husband, holds back, and follows 3 steps behind. That said, it's not like John is some extremely henpecked husband, and since Ethan lived alone for quite a while, he doesn't mind doing housework either. But when Mary is around, she says the men should just sit and does everything herself. By the way, in front of John and Ethan, she calls me Emma, not stupid wife. When it's just the two of us, I'm stupid wife. When the men are watching, she doesn't make me do anything and even puts on airs of looking after me, which I think is amazing. I've never seen someone who can switch between 2 faces so cleanly like that. For that reason, to Ethan, Mary is the perfect mother, always kind and considerate of her family. I thought so too at first, which is why I agreed to live near Mary's house like this. But the reality was different. My mother-in-law had an unbelievably dark side. Still, for Ethan, it probably doesn't feel good to hear his own parent bad-mouthed. And more than anything, Ethan seems to like his mother, so I thought it would be better for me not to say anything, but I want Ethan to understand soon too.
Mom did all those things. You don't believe it? No, it's not that I don't believe it, but do you think I'm lying? I don't think you lie.
Thank goodness. If Ethan had called me a liar here, it would have been grounds for immediate divorce. Hey, can you tell her to stop? Getting called out on weekdays is really tough for me.
Huh, you want me to tell my mom that?
Yeah.
If I say it, she'll just say shut up, stupid wife, and that'll be the end of it.
He still has an expression like he can't 100% believe what I'm saying. But he should understand that doubting me in this situation is the real problem. Okay. I'll call her now then. Yes. Please. Maybe Ethan thought that by calling in front of me, if I were lying, I might get flustered. But there's not a single lie in my words, so there's no damage done. Rather, if Mary will quiet down after being scolded by her beloved son, I can easily forgive a small suspicion like that by pretending not to notice. Ethan takes out his smartphone, swiftly operates it with his fingertips, and puts the smartphone to his ear. Oh, hi, Mom. Yeah, I'm eating now. pork sauté today and no, I wanted to ask you something. I can picture Mary getting all excited over a call from her son. Is it true that you're calling Emma 3 times a week and making her do errands? I'm a bit disappointed that he's phrasing the question like that. He's making it seem like he's only asking because I said so. Well, it's actually true, so whatever. I'm sure Mary will say something like it just ended up that way or Emma is so kind that I can't help relying on her. Silly me. Emma has work too, so it's a problem for her to be called out like that. No, she's at home, but she says it's the same as working at a company. I sigh, realizing he just doesn't get it after all. Mary probably wants to say that I should quit my job, hurry up and have kids, and take care of the house. Just like she did. And I think she also wants to loudly declare that I should listen to what she says.
I get that it's inconvenient without a car. Maybe Dad can take you on weekends or... Yeah, that's his time off. But you know, Emma isn't on break on weekdays, she's working.
Yes, that's it. Go, Ethan. Secure my proper work hours for me.
It's not okay even if it's just sometimes, but... Wait a sec.
Saying that, Ethan takes the smartphone away from his ear and looks at me. Mom says she wants you to take her to the shopping mall just for tomorrow.
But I have a job due for delivery the day after tomorrow.
Does she think I can just block off my schedule ahead of time? And what about Ethan, relaying that to me without changing anything? I can hear Mary's shrill voice talking non-stop from the smartphone Ethan is holding. Mary always uses this fawning tone when talking to Ethan and John. But when she orders me around, she uses a much lower and more curt way of speaking. She said just for a little while in the afternoon.
And?
I know it's really a bother for you, Emma, but could you please do it just for tomorrow? For a moment, the word divorce flashed through my head. I've heard that dealing with the in-laws is often a cause for divorce. I thought about it as if it were someone else's problem.
Then you won't have to listen to Mom's requests anymore. You heard that, right, Mom? Make this the last time.
Ethan puts the smartphone back to his ear and speaks to Mary.
Even though she has work tomorrow too, she's specially making time for this. You get that you need to be grateful to her, Mom?
As I half listen to Ethan talking, I start to feel fed up. In the end, Ethan prioritizes Mary and demands that I work for Mary's sake. It's disappointing. But thinking realistically, if after tomorrow I never have to follow Mary's orders again, that's a big benefit for me. From now on, I can just ignore whatever she says. And even if she tries to force things, I can just toss it all to Ethan to deal with. In the first place, if I got divorced, I'd be cutting ties with Mary too, I suppose.
Sorry for deciding on my own, but it didn't seem like the discussion would wrap up unless I made it a trade-off.
Ethan, apparently finished with the call, places his smartphone on the table and says this.
I'm really sorry. Mom doesn't know much about the ways of the world, and she tends to assume she's always right, so she can be pushy. So I should just do as she says? No, that's not it. Unless we make it so we each get one demand met, we won't find a compromise. I've been compromising and pushing myself all this time. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
I understand that Ethan probably couldn't really believe Mary was in the wrong either, but he trusted what I said and talked to Mary for me. I also get that using a trade-off to settle the negotiation can be effective. Still, it feels unreasonable. The feeling that I can't accept it is strong, and I don't feel like saying thank you for resolving this to him.
So, what time tomorrow?
Oh, around 4, she said.
I'll go because I don't want to be accused of breaking a promise, but this really has to be the last time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. Just looking at Ethan's relieved face irritates me. Why do I have to feel this way? I didn't get married to feel like this. Rather, if I hadn't gotten married, I wouldn't have to feel this way. My thoughts started to spiral out of control, so I consciously stopped thinking about it for a moment. I can think more about the future after I get through tomorrow. I don't want to, but for now, let's just try to overcome tomorrow. As Mary requested, I went to pick her up at 4 p.m. She made me wait about 30 minutes, saying I'm not ready yet. When she finally got in the car, she started mumbling incessantly.
Tattling to Ethan, how cowardly. Not even listening to a family request, what an undutiful daughter-in-law. Just staying at home all day, and you exaggerate about being busy. Abandoning someone in need, you fiend. I'm so unlucky to have such a stupid wife.
It went on like this the whole time, but if I can just get through today, I'll be free. Since Ethan talked to her, she should know I'm dissatisfied. I don't need to smile at her, so I ignore all of Mary's remarks. After arriving at the mall, I had to carry her bags as usual. But when I decided not to reply to everything, I felt a bit more at ease than usual. Maybe out of spite, Mary was buying even heavier, larger, and more expensive things than ever. But we finally finished shopping, loaded the bags into the car, and started heading back. Once I drop off the bags and Mary at her house, it'll really be over. Even on the way back, Mary was babbling on about something, but it's not even reaching my ears anymore. I just want it to end quickly. That's all I can think about. When we finally arrived at Mary's long-awaited house, I immediately got out of the car and headed for the trunk.
Can you hurry up and unlock the front door? Otherwise, I'll leave it right in front of the door,
I said curtly as I got out. Mary was fussing about something, but she probably thought it would be a problem to have the bags left in front of the door. She obediently opened the rear sliding door and got out, or so I thought.
Ow! It hurts!
A loud sound and Mary's voice. Wondering what happened, I looked from the back of the car towards the rear sliding door. Mary was sitting on the ground.
Ow! Ow! Ow!
I walked over to see what was going on. The open rear door, Mary sitting on the ground, and the scattered contents of her bags next to her.
Did you fall while getting out? This car! The door! It caught my foot! My bone is broken!
Probably out of frustration. Mary is screaming hysterically. However, this automatic sliding door has a pinch prevention function. If it senses an obstacle while opening or closing, the door moves in the opposite direction. Currently, the door is open, so she probably just fell out of the car, or closed the door too quickly while getting out and nearly got pinched. She's screaming while sitting, so she may have actually hurt something. But in the end, isn't it her own carelessness?
It hurts! Hey, stupid wife! Ambulance!
I'm really fed up with Mary, who hurls insults even in this situation. Every single time, she calls me a stupid wife. If she says it that much, should I really become a stupid wife? An ambulance, right?
Ambulance! Are you deaf, stupid wife?
Wee-oo.
Huh?
Wee-oo. I decided to fully play the role of stupid wife. She only said ambulance. She didn't say call an ambulance. So I just kept imitating the sound of an ambulance.
Hey!
Wee-oo.
Shut up! Enough already!
Mary reached for her smartphone that had rolled out of her bag and called the fire department herself to request an ambulance. While waiting for the ambulance to arrive, I kept generously imitating the sound of an ambulance for her. It was a bit amusing to see Mary looking at me like I was some incomprehensible creature. After a few minutes, the ambulance arrived. Mary still couldn't move. The paramedics examined her, immobilized her right ankle, and carried her into the ambulance.
Should I ride along too? Of course, I don't need an idiot like you.
Mary was still screaming, and the paramedics were trying to calm her down. I had no intention of riding along anyway.
Are you family?
One of the crew members addressed me. It seemed they had decided which hospital to take her to.
That person's name is Mary. I'll go to the hospital by my car. Understood. Then please go to this hospital.
The name of the hospital was written on the memo I was handed. It was a general hospital about a 20-minute drive from here. After seeing off the ambulance like this, I decided to contact John and Ethan before leaving. They both just finished work, so they said they would head directly to the hospital now. It was close to the company where John works, and for Ethan, he could get off at the station on his way home from work and be there right away.
I guess we'll talk when everyone's here.
I muttered to myself and got into the car. When I arrived at the hospital and entered the treatment room where the staff directed me, Mary with her right ankle firmly immobilized, John, and Ethan were all there.
How horrible! You pinned my leg with the door.
As soon as she saw my face, Mary, sitting on the treatment bed with her legs stretched out, started screaming. But with John and Ethan there, her vigor was less than half the usual.
Excuse me? It's broken. Take responsibility.
I had predicted it would come to this, but I never thought she would bring it up even in front of John and Ethan. Does she seriously believe the claim that I caused Mary's injury will hold up? I looked over at Ethan, and after a big sigh, he opened his mouth.
She says it's fractured. Apparently, she twisted her ankle with all her weight on it. My leg got caught in the door. That woman did it. It's your fault I have a fracture. Mom, you got hurt because you twisted your own ankle, right?
As Ethan is speaking, his mother butts in, screaming hysterically. If she twisted it, that must mean she failed at getting out of the car and fell, just as I thought.
Mary, why are you trying to blame me? It's because you're harassing me. Even if you fell on your own, to say it's harassment from me. Shut up, stupid wife. It's your fault. You're the one to blame.
It seems when I'm involved, Mary's true nature comes out. Even though John and Ethan are here, her hidden face is showing.
Enough already!
John yelled at his wife, who kept screaming.
There's no need for Emma to do something like that. Rather, weren't you the one harassing your daughter-in-law? That's not true, dear. That girl, even though she's the daughter-in-law, she never listens to what I say. You, be quiet. Emma, could you tell us what the situation was?
It seems John didn't believe his wife's story from the beginning. In that case, perfect. Let's make sure they know everything.
Understood. Then, shall we go to the parking lot? I'll explain using the actual car.
We asked the nurse in the treatment room to look after Mary, and the three of us headed to the parking lot together.
When I saw Mary sitting on the ground, the rear door was open. So either she failed at getting out of the car, or she closed the door too quickly and panicked when it made contact. In any case, she probably didn't stick the landing.
I actually opened the rear sliding door of the car to show them.
When the door makes contact while closing, it opens back up again like this. It's a safety device installed on automatic sliding doors.
I touch the closing sliding door as if pinching my arm in it, and the door's motion stops once, then starts opening again. That's right. If it were an old manual sliding door, that would be one thing, but for it to automatically pinch. She must have fallen while getting out of the car. It's her ankle that's injured, after all.
Ethan also says in exasperation. From the looks of it, she was really ordering you around, huh, Emma? Sorry for asking you again today. I have a lot I want to say to Ethan, who's apologizing reservedly, but for now, revealing everything takes priority.
If you look at these numerous messages, you'll understand. Far from harassment from me, I was being called so much it was interfering with my work.
I open the message screen from Mary on my smartphone. I slowly swipe through, going back through the old messages so John and Ethan, who are peering at my phone, can see. Written there are a slew of abusive words like bring the car, go by that, clean the yard, and stupid wife. This much? For John, it may have been an unexpected, sudden event. He mutters in a dazed manner. Ethan too says nothing with a surprised expression, perhaps because it's his first time seeing it with his own eyes.
By the way, I carried her purchases again today, but I didn't have time to unload them from the car, so the things she bought are here.
I open the trunk to show the load inside. It's crammed full of bags. Today, there were a lot of particularly large items, and she had bought brand-name goods and jewelry. Got it. Let's head back. John, who had carefully checked the bags, turns back after saying just that. Ethan and I also follow and return to the treatment room where we were before. Where did you get the money to shop that much? As soon as he enters the room, John interrogates Mary. Mary is cowed by his serious expression. A credit card. A card? You used the family card I gave you? Well, there was an ad about a card you can use to withdraw money. I wondered what they were talking about at first, but when I heard ad and card to withdraw money, it clicked. Her father seemed to have realized the same thing. Don't tell me, you borrowed from a card loan. It said I could pay it back little by little. How much did you borrow? No, wait, why would you even? It's probably a considerable sum, I think. Every shopping trip, she was enjoying shopping quite lavishly. I thought John must be making a lot for her to do that, but to think this is what it was. But... Mary stammers in a frightened manner. It was a power move against me, wasn't it? I'm sure Mary herself wasn't thinking about it logically enough to explain it herself. In that case, let me explain it for her. You often said if you don't have good things, it reveals your lack of class. So I think you felt good about flaunting that you could buy things I couldn't afford to buy. And when you told me to take you shopping, your pride wouldn't allow you to not buy anything. At my words, Mary opened her mouth as if to retort something, but no words came out. She just twisted her face in displeasure. In other words, what I'm saying is correct.
What the heck were you thinking?
John's weak mutter echoes in the treatment room. Mary dropped her shoulders and kept her face down, not uttering a single word. About a month after her injury, Mary became able to walk. After that, I heard she started working at a factory with a company-provided housing facility. Regarding her debt, John apparently demanded that she work to pay back the amount in exchange for him consolidating it and repaying it in full. He said it was a job opportunity he found through a connection of an acquaintance, and the plan was for her to live in the housing facility and repay John from her salary, excluding necessary expenses. If she refused, she'd have to repay it on her own. Furthermore, when he said he would file for damages in divorce, she complied. John said he would make her live in the housing facility the whole time until the repayment was completed, however long that took. He hopes she'll have a change of heart while working like that, but if it's impossible, he's decided to divorce her.
Who knows what will happen when she finishes repaying and comes back. For now, she occasionally calls to complain to Ethan, so I don't have much hope. Ethan tries to reason with her and sometimes doesn't even answer the phone, but for her, who has never properly worked before, it seems to be causing considerable stress. She just constantly grumbles.
It's hard. I'm tired. I don't want to feel this way. I hate this and that.
As for my relationship with Ethan, which at one point I seriously considered divorcing. After returning home from the hospital, he gave me a deep apology. I was very surprised to see someone apologizing so deeply for the first time in my life, but what surprised me even more was that Ethan was even crying with snot dripping down.
I never thought she was doing such terrible things to you. And yet, I forced you to do as she said, telling you it would be the last time. I'm so sorry for saying that when I had no idea how much you hated it.
He must have properly understood after seeing the messages from Mary that I showed him. It seemed to be tears overflowing with emotions like guilt, remorse, and empathy for me. Yes, he is a kind person, full of empathy and compassion. So much so that he doesn't hesitate to admit his faults and offer a deep apology while showing his tearful face like this. I remembered that I fell in love with him because he's this kind of person.
It did hurt when you said things that seemed to take her side. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I feel clear about it now, so it's okay.
Emma.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
In a sense, we both had a valuable experience through this. I want to make use of it and deepen our bond once again. 2 years have passed since then, and we are now living as a family of 3 in a new place. Ethan was transferred after that, and we moved. I became a freelancer in anticipation of this. In this new place, I got pregnant, gave birth, and am currently in the midst of child rearing. My parents came to help out after the birth. I haven't been able to meet John in person yet, but when I talked to him over a video call while showing him the baby, the corners of his eyes drooped. Incidentally, Mary apparently still hasn't been able to come back. I plan to resume work soon. At first, I intend to keep the workload light while seeing how it goes, but balancing work and childcare will surely be tough. Even so, I want to live fulfilling days while cooperating with Ethan.
Engaging in physical intimacy here feels great, doesn't it? Yeah. But Mary really is oblivious, isn't she? Totally. To think she hasn't realized what's going on between her husband and her sister.
Laughter from the 2 of them followed. I stood in front of the room, fists clenched. I wanted to burst in and confront them, both naked. While I was thinking this, my sister Emma's voice gradually faded. It gradually turned into a whisper between them, and before long, her sweet voice echoed. I had reached my limit of patience. What are you doing in my bed? A rage I couldn't vocalize rose within me, and I quietly left the area to avoid making noise. Maybe I am dense. But I had a hunch about my husband's infidelity. I was afraid to acknowledge that he was cheating, so I did nothing. But being presented with undeniable proof woke me up. They shouldn't be forgiven. If I ran away now, it would stay this way forever. I didn't want to be looked down upon by anyone anymore. I decided to take revenge on them for myself. Thinking this, I quietly entered the living room. My name is Mary. I'm 27 and a preschool teacher. It's a tough job, but I've always dreamed of doing it and don't plan to quit. However, my husband Tom wants me to quit my job. The reason being, it's embarrassing, apparently.
Since I'm earning, there's no need for you to work.
He works at a food processing company owned by my father. He's a university graduate and a rising star in the company. Yet, he's embarrassed that his wife works and fears being mocked by his college friends. That seems to be his thought. Ironically, my sister Emma has said the same thing. But in her case, it felt more derogatory. Clumsy working as a preschool teacher? That's laughable. You better quit soon. Complaints from my husband and condescension from my sister. That's my daily life now. But being looked down upon by Emma isn't new. Emma, with her elegant features like our mother, has always looked down on me, who is average looking.
You really have nothing going for you. Below average in looks, and not a hint of dexterity.
That's not true.
What? Don't you dare talk back to me. Just listen quietly to what I have to say.
How many times we've had this conversation. And similar things were said by those around us. Emma is beautiful like Mom. You two don't look much alike, do they? That's what I'd always hear, wherever I went. While it's true that she has elegant features, it's not like I'm unattractive. I just take after our father. I wanted to retort that, but my inability to speak well prevented me from doing so. In the end, she was always the one everyone doted on. Even my mother favored Emma, who resembled her. There's a clear incident that shows this. It happened when I was in elementary school. One holiday, while Dad was out at the convenience store, Mom said to Emma, "Emma, shall we go buy some clothes?"
Really? Yay!
Emma was thrilled. I hesitated for a moment, hoping, but when Mom looked at me, she said with a cold gaze, "You don't need clothes, do you, Mary?" I averted my gaze hesitantly. Then, Mom looked at me sharply.
You don't need them, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's too bad. Since Mary doesn't need any, we'll go just the two of us.
And so, Mom left with Emma, leaving me to stay home alone. Soon after, Dad came home. Surprised, he asked why I was alone.
Mom and Emma went to buy clothes.
I nearly burst into tears. Seeing my state, Dad immediately understood. He had probably sensed that Mom favored Emma. Dad confronted Mom when she returned. And Mom began to cry and make excuses.
Mary said she didn't need any. She was just being considerate. You should know that.
I don't understand what you are talking about, Mom retorted sharply. Dad was disappointed with her attitude.
Mary, next time, let's go out together, okay?
Yeah. Since that day, Dad has always been more attentive towards me. However, Mom's attitude remained unchanged. She always favored Emma. Honestly, I had given up. But it seemed my father hadn't. One day, he brought a woman home. She was a relative named Kate. Kate was supposed to live alone as she entered college, but our relatives were worried, so my father took her in.
Nice to meet you, Mary.
Yeah. The idea was, with a relative in the house, my mother couldn't ignore me as easily. I later found out that was my father's intention. With Kate's arrival, my mother and Emma's attitudes visibly changed. Whenever Emma made a snide remark to me, Kate would scold her.
Emma, it's not nice to say that to Mary. You're a good girl, Emma, you understand, right?
Emma would sulk at her words. She was displeased but seemed unable to voice her complaints directly. My mother was the same. She was pointed out whenever something happened. For example, when my mother prepared snacks only for Emma, Kate said,
"Oh, snacks just for her?"
No.
Mary's is coming up next, right?
My mother grimaced at Kate's words. She couldn't say there wasn't any for me. If she did, it might get back to my father through Kate. Fearing that, my mother reluctantly said, Yes, of course. I'm about to prepare it now. Just wait a moment, Mary." Reluctantly, my mother opened the fridge and placed a snack in front of me, just like hers. That's how Kate saved me many times. I often thought it would have been nice if she was my real sister. I was 10 years old at the time and thought so many times. She was 8 years older, a bit of an age gap. But in my heart, Kate had become my sister. And that feeling only grew stronger. Eventually, I couldn't hold back and confided in Kate. "Hey, Kate. Can I think of you as my real sister from now on?" "Of course," she said with a smile. But this angered my mother. "You're deceiving Mary, aren't you?" "Huh? What do you mean?" "Telling Mary she can think of you as her real sister. What are you after?" My mother confronted Kate harshly. Of course, Kate had nothing to feel guilty about. She responded calmly to my mother. But the situation turned when my mother said, "Kate, you're having an affair with my husband." "What? That's not true at all. Don't lie. You're Joe's mistress. That's why trying to make Mary your own daughter." My mother berated Kate, and her voice was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Of course, there was no truth to my father having an affair with Kate. But it did affect how we were seen by those around us. Indeed, rumors spread in the neighborhood that Kate was my father's mistress. Reluctantly, my father had to send her away from our home. Once Kate left, everything quickly went back to how it was. But there was one change. My parents' relationship worsened. "Bringing a mistress into our home is the lowest of the low. I've told you many times, Kate is. She's a relative, right? I'm tired of that excuse." My mother turned away. My father seemed at a loss. With her gone, the hostility towards me intensified. Unable to bear it, I decided to leave home as soon as I graduated high school. After that, I worked part-time jobs while attending community college and then obtained my preschool teaching certificate. Even after becoming a preschool teacher, I continued to stay away from home. Going home meant facing snide remarks from my mother and Emma. I was concerned about my family's company. But with Emma there, it shouldn't be a problem. Feeling bad for my father, I told him this over the phone. He simply said he understood. It seemed he understood my feelings. Relieved, I devoted myself to my job as a preschool teacher. Years passed, and then one day, I received a call from my father. "Mary, do you have someone you're thinking of marrying?" "What's this all of a sudden, Dad?" "Well, actually." My father's story went like this. Not long ago, he went for an annual physical examination. Though he wasn't found to have any illness, a relative who went with him was diagnosed with something. That's when my father thought about the need for a successor for his company. The company needs a successor. My father's company was started by my grandfather. Furthermore, it grew to its current size with the help of relatives. However, it's not a family business. It's just that it has been supported by relatives. Meaning, if something happens to my father, someone must take over the company. Naturally, there are options for a capable person to become the president, but my father wants his own child to inherit it. So, marriage, huh? Emma can't be trusted, but how about you, Mary? With one of our capable employees? My father's voice sounded unusually serious. He seems quite concerned about the annual physical examination. Then I'll just meet him, that's all. Okay, then the schedule is. It seemed my father had already decided on a schedule. Eventually, I agreed to meet someone from the company as my father suggested. I thought I'd just meet him and then find a way to decline politely. But my plans were thwarted because my mother started pushing for the marriage. For some reason, my mother encouraged me to get married.
This is a good opportunity for the introverted Mary.
There's no reason to refuse, is there? But
Do you have someone else in mind?
I had no choice but to remain silent at my mother's questioning. Unable to refuse, I ended up dating him.
I'm sorry. My mom is quite pushy.
No, I'm more than happy to be with a beauty like you, said Tom, the man I was introduced to, with a smile. I returned a forced smile. He's kind, and according to my father, he's a fast-rising star in the company. I'm not sure, but is this what marriage is like? People around me always praised Emma, so I was hardly ever complimented myself. But he called me beautiful. Even if it was just flattery, I might not meet someone like him again in the future. So, I thought maybe I could marry him. And I married Tom. We started living together at my parents' house, as my father wished. I didn't like it, but Emma was living alone. I only had to endure my mother. So, I thought. But I soon regretted my naive judgment. As soon as we got married, Tom's attitude changed drastically.
Quit your job as a preschool teacher.
Why?
I love my job. I'm going to succeed and become the president. It's embarrassing for the wife of a future president to work.
His tone was gentle, but what he said was quite harsh. Don't work like a poor person. Act like a wealthy one. I felt like I could see through Tom's unspoken feelings. My affection for him quickly cooled. Within a few years, I felt nothing for him. That's why our marriage was full of misunderstandings. Now, we just think of each other as roommates. Even though we're only technically a married couple, I can't let Tom do as he pleases. On the other hand, if he's cheating somewhere, I wish he would just do it. If I could catch him cheating, I could end this relationship immediately.
But thinking this way might mean I've completely lost any affection for him.
Even though I think this, I'm afraid to make it clear. I was caught between these conflicting feelings. In fact, he would sneak out occasionally. If I investigated his behavior, I'm sure I'd catch him. Yet, I did nothing. On a certain holiday, I decided to go out in the morning to buy things for the childcare center's play.
I'll be back by the evening.
What about your dad and mom?
Dad's working on his day off. Mom went out shopping with a friend.
I was sure because I saw them off. When I said that, he nodded reluctantly.
So, it's just me then. That's right. Take care of the house, please.
Yeah. Tom said reluctantly, scratching his head as he went back to his room. I left the house, wondering if it was okay. I headed to the nearby dollar store.
First,
I filled my basket with the necessary items while looking at the notes on my smartphone. After I finished shopping, I casually put my hand in my pocket. That's when I realized. The wallet that was supposed to be there was missing.
Wait, my wallet? Did I drop it?
I stopped myself as I realized. I had left it on the living room table. Thinking I made a mistake, I put the items back and hurried home. As I unlocked the front door, strange voices could be heard from inside. It seemed like a woman's voice.
Wait. The only one home should be Tom, right?
I headed towards the source of the voices. It was our bedroom. Why from the bedroom? I wondered as the woman's voice became clearer.
Mary isn't coming back until the evening?
I immediately covered my mouth, realizing it was Emma's voice. Tom's voice followed.
She went to buy things for the play. Then we have until the evening to enjoy ourselves.
If you look closely, you'll see that the door is slightly open. Peering through the slightly ajar door, I saw Emma and Tom inside. The two of them were on the bed, not wearing any clothes. Tom and Emma were having an affair. As I came to that realization, he said,
Engaging in physical intimacy here is quite something, isn't it?
Indeed. But Mary is really oblivious, isn't she?
Absolutely. She still hasn't realized what's going on between her husband and her sister.
Their laughter followed. I stood in front of the room, fists clenched. I wanted to burst in and confront them, both naked. As I thought this, Emma's voice gradually faded. It turned into whispers, and soon her sweet voice filled the air. I had reached my limit of patience. What are you doing in my bed? A rage I couldn't vocalize rose within me. And I quietly left the area to avoid making noise. Maybe I am dense, but I had a hunch about his infidelity. I was afraid to acknowledge he was cheating, so I did nothing. But being presented with undeniable proof woke me up. Tom and the detestable Emma shouldn't be forgiven. If I ran away now, it would stay this way forever. I didn't want to be looked down upon by anyone anymore. I decided to take revenge on them for myself. Thinking this, I quietly entered the living room. The family computer was in the living room. I really wanted to use my own computer. But my computer was in the bedroom. Since Tom and Emma were there, I couldn't go inside. I can do at least this much, I murmured as I took the webcam in my hand. With it, I went up to the bedroom door and pointed the camera inside through the gap, then hurried back to the living room. I turned on the computer and connected it to the webcam wirelessly. At the same time, I sent a message to someone. Then, like a web conference, I streamed the camera footage to that person.
Can you see it?
I asked using the computer's microphone. An immediate response came back. I can see it, perfectly. The reply came from Kate. Yes, I had contacted her. After Kate left the house, I felt quite lonely and depressed. Seeing this, my father set up a computer so I could keep in touch with her. Since then, I frequently communicated with her. It was like having a web conference, as my father put it. In any case, connecting with her was easy.
Emma and Tom are in the midst of an affair. Kate, can I live stream this?
Of course. I'll record it for you, too. Kate had graduated from university and worked in computer-related fields. She mentioned something about IoT solutions. This kind of task was easy for her. How much time had passed? Suddenly, there was a loud noise.
Ouch! What's this?
What happened?
Something weird at the entrance.
Finally, she noticed. As I thought this, Emma's loud voice echoed.
What? A camera!
Footsteps hurriedly approached. Soon after, she burst into the living room. Finding me, she tried to fix her partially removed clothes and yelled,
This is your doing! What is this?
It's a webcam.
You were spying on us! Enough already! You're the worst!
Emma slammed the webcam to the floor. The worst one is you, I retorted while thinking. If you break it, you're paying for it. It's quite expensive, you know.
Shut up! More importantly, why you are here?
Unlike you, I live here, I answered nonchalantly. But Emma seemed infuriated by my attitude.
That's not what I mean. You know that.
She raised her voice. I replied indifferently.
I just answered your question. But you're prepared, aren't you? Eh? Why are you acting all high and mighty?
Emma screamed, and finally, Tom showed up. He looked at Emma and smirked nastily.
Ah, you were here. Mary, did you finish shopping? Not yet. I had to go back for my wallet, and when I did, I caught you two engaging in physical intimacy. Peeking, huh? Nice hobby.
I can't see the humor in this situation. That's why I said to him,
Think it's funny? You do realize what happens if you cheat, right? Nothing will happen.
No one's going to listen to you anyway, Tom said with a scoff.
Why do you think that? Because Emma is here, and so is your mom. They're on our side.
I see. That's how it is. But this time, we have evidence. So, no matter what Mom says, it can't be overturned. Thinking this, I quietly stood up and declared to Tom,
Tom, I'm divorcing you. Just now, I got the perfect evidence. Huh? You think you can divorce? Try it if you can.
He doesn't seem to grasp the situation. Sighing, I turned to Emma.
I'll be demanding compensation from you. Compensation? From me? For being the other woman.
As I raised my voice, Emma looked sulky. Frowning, she glared at me harshly.
Don't act all high and mighty when you can't do anything. Just quietly listen to us. Sorry, but I'm an adult. I won't listen to Emma or Mom anymore.
I grabbed the wallet from the table and slipped past them, heading straight for the door. Tom followed me.
Where are you going? I'm leaving. I don't want to stay here anymore. I get it. Mary, you have someone else, right? Going to his place, aren't you?
I was astonished. What a wild imagination. Perhaps, because he was cheating, he thought I was too. Regardless, I looked at Tom sternly and retorted,
I got evidence of the cheating. There's no need for me to stay any longer.
After stating this unilaterally, I went outside.
Wait! We're not done talking. The talk is over. I'm divorcing you, Tom. We'll have a discussion later about this.
I shouted over his voice and slammed the door with force. Heading to Kate's house next. Kate lives alone, about a 30-minute drive away. Since she's not married, she might welcome me even on short notice. With that hope, I rang Kate's doorbell. Kate immediately came out. Seeing my face, she hugged me without asking why. I was so relieved that I cried without caring who saw. Once I calmed down, Kate let me into her room.
Are you okay? Have you calmed down?
Yeah.
It must have been tough. But it might be even tougher at home.
Not understanding why Kate was laughing, I asked her, What do you mean? Well, actually. Kate started to explain, barely containing her laughter. The story goes back a bit. Right after I contacted Kate, she started recording their engagement in physical intimacy. Then, Kate received a call from someone. The caller was a work contact, wanting to discuss work. After quickly finishing the work conversation, the person apparently sought personal advice from Kate. That's when Kate had a brilliant idea and did something quite bold.
This broadcast?
Yes, I recorded Mary's stream and shared it with that person too.
So, a complete stranger saw it?
Embarrassed, I covered my face with my hands. I hadn't intended to go that far. At that moment, Kate patted my back. It wasn't a stranger I shared it with. It was your dad.
My dad?
As I asked again, Kate started laughing and explained. She works at an IoT solutions company. It's a company that solves various problems through the internet and devices. Dad was interested in IoT solutions and had been consulting with her about her company. So, it was half work, half personal. But the work talk ended quickly. Then, Dad asked about me, noticing that things weren't going well between Tom and me. Hearing this, Kate had an idea. The cause was undoubtedly him, because the evidence was right there in front of us. Thinking this, she prefaced it by showing the video.
This is what's happening right now.
Kate sends the video I was streaming to my father. My father watched the video silently. After a while, when Emma broke the camera, my father said this to Kate.
Take care of Mary if she comes.
That's all he said before cutting the communication. What happened after that, I don't know. But he probably went back home. Kate said so. At that moment, my smartphone rang. It was my father who contacted me. He said me to come back home. It was a message from my father saying, of course, I didn't want to go back home. But if my father says to come back, it means some resolution must have been reached.
I'll go with you,
Kate said, and that made me feel prepared. Kate and I went back home together. When we got home, Emma and Tom were being made to reflect in the living room. In front of them was my father, furious. I softly spoke to my father. Dad, I'm home.
Ah, I was waiting. These two have something they want to say to Mary.
My father stared at Emma and Tom. I'm sorry.
It was all my fault.
Tom deeply apologized. Emma, next to him, also apologized deeply.
I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Please forgive me.
Emma was crying, which was rare. I felt a bit relieved.
What will you do, Mary? Forgive them or not?
My father asked me. But the answer was already clear to me.
There's no way I can forgive them. I'm going to divorce and I'll demand compensation from both. Wait a minute. I don't have any money. That's your problem, not mine. Please, wait.
Emma began to make a fuss. But when my father scolded her, she suddenly became quiet. How could that arrogant Emma change so much while I was away? I was so surprised I couldn't continue. While I was thinking, Tom said,
Mary, please reconsider the divorce.
No.
Don't say that. Without you, I won't have a place in the company anymore.
Tom started crying. He looked like a child.
What do you mean?
I looked back at my father, who then explained while looking intently at Tom.
We've been favoring him because he was Mary's husband. What will people think if that's gone? I see. People will think Tom messed up. That's the end of it.
Of course, that doesn't mean he'll be fired from the company. But an isolated ex-husband, what happens to him is clear without saying. No one will lend a hand carelessly. Tom cried and clung to me, but there was no reason for mercy. So, I said to the crying Tom,
Too bad. Maybe look for a new job? Wait. Please, let's start over. Okay? No. I've decided to divorce.
I shook off his clinging hand. The moment I did, he collapsed on the spot. After that, the video of engaging in physical intimacy became the deciding factor, and Tom and I officially divorced. Of course, with clear evidence, I could demand a hefty compensation. I also demanded compensation from Emma. She resisted, but she was powerless in front of that evidence. Most of the process was left to the lawyer. Because I had preparations for a childcare center's play and daily work. Working was actually more distracting. I was prepared for some disputes, but the divorce went surprisingly smoothly. Maybe it was thanks to the lawyer. I felt relieved. Then, one day, a parent named Ben approached me at pickup time.
Mary, can I have a moment?
What is it?
Recently, I've been seeing a strange person around the childcare center.
It seems there's someone watching the childcare center. Other parents are scared too. It's better for the child care center to take action before any harm comes to the children. That's what he told me. I was just surprised. I didn't know. What does the person look like?
Like a suspicious man.
Before things get worse, I thought we should take measures. So, I immediately consulted with the principal. The principal listened to my story and consulted with the local police right away. The police promised to increase patrols. Yet, that alone wasn't enough. I worked with other caregivers to alert the parents, hoping that would make the person wary. A few days later, during pickup time, a man's loud voice came from the street in front of the child care center.
Hey! What are you doing here? Stop!
Startled, I instinctively protected the children. The principal got the children inside the building. Once the children's safety was assured, I looked out the window towards the street.
What are you doing here?
The loud voice was Ben's. He seemed to have come to pick up a child. In front of him was a person wearing a black hood, looking suspicious, holding a camera. The appearance was dubious, maybe a pervert. The principal must have thought the same and had called the police. At that moment, the man retorted to Ben.
Not really.
Hearing that voice, I was struck with realization.
That voice. Tom?
Thinking so, I strained my eyes to look at the person under the hood. A glimpse of the face visible through the hood gap was clearly Tom.
Why is he here?
By the time I thought that, I had already rushed out. Noticing me, Ben moved to shield me. At that moment, the hooded person shouted,
So you were cheating after all? Is he the one?
The hooded person, Tom, was raising his voice at me. Ben was dumbfounded by the situation. Then he quietly asked me,
Do you know this person?
Astonished that he was the suspicious person. Momentarily deflated, Tom raised his voice again.
That man is your affair partner.
Tom was pointing at Ben. I retorted in disbelief.
What are you talking about? This person is a parent of a child who attends the child care center. Don't lie. I heard it from your mom. Mary, you're having an affair with a parent, aren't you?
In front of me, he started to rant unilaterally. It was right after the divorce. Desperate to reconcile, Tom had consulted my mother. Then she told him I was having an affair with a parent of a child attending the child care center. Finding that a fair partner would reconcile the two of us. Their affair was just an act. She convinced him that way and promised. I was dumbfounded by how such a story came about and couldn't say anything. Then, a loud siren sounded, and several police cars arrived.
What's this? Just stay calm.
Ben caught Tom as he tried to flee in panic. Tom struggled and shouted,
Let go! Mary, do you know this person?
Ben asked again. I shook my head and answered,
Ben, you're a police officer, right? Please take this suspicious person away.
With a cold statement, he was surprised. Eventually, Tom was taken away by the police. Later, I heard he was released after receiving a warning from the police. Whether he was truly all right after that is debatable. In fact, many children started crying when he was found. Naturally, no parent would forgive this. Indeed, one parent filed a complaint against him for traumatizing their child. Whether compensation was awarded is uncertain, but it certainly added insult to injury for Tom. Seeing the situation gravely, my father fired him. He even ordered that part of the severance pay be used to compensate the parents. He could not ignore his father's command. Everything was recorded on video. Some of it was even broadcast on a video site. In the end, he had no choice but to ask for the video's removal as a condition for reconciliation. Tom, now jobless, seems to be living by working part-time jobs at night. The mother who incited Tom had a huge fight with my father. It seems she wanted to help Emma. Learning this, my father was furious. And then he said to her,
"Why do you always antagonize Mary? I can't stand this anymore. We're getting a divorce."
Thus, my mother was kicked out of the house. Losing a place to go, she ended up crashing at Emma's room. But she had just quit her job because of the rumors at work about being sued for compensation due to the affair. Naturally, Emma tried to kick her out immediately. However, she wouldn't be ousted easily, because Kate had spread the story of the divorce among the relatives. Seen as the bad woman who only doted on one daughter. Among the relatives, that was my mother's reputation. And Emma, too, was labeled as the worst woman for stealing her sister's husband. With no relatives to turn to, the two had to support each other. Eventually, they decided to support each other with part-time janitorial jobs and moved into a small apartment together, so I heard. As for me, I continued working as a childcare worker. The incident with Tom had caused trouble at my workplace. Initially, I intended to quit. But I was persuaded to stay by the parents. That's why I'm still working as a childcare worker. Thinking about remarriage or dating is out of the question for now. But if a good opportunity arises, I might consider it seriously.
"Mary, are you having any troubles?"
No, rather I'm sorry for the inconvenience the other day.
"If you ever have any troubles, I'm always here to listen. I'm single and have plenty of time."
When he said that, I felt a little happy. Maybe this is what love is, but that's a secret for now.
Finally, the nuisance is gone. From today, we're living with my parents at my house.
Matthew's words hung in the air as I stood dumbfounded in front of our demolished family home, right after my parents had passed away.
"What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind too? Hurry up and bring the inheritance over to my place."
I couldn't help but burst into laughter at his words. I see. So that's what this was about.
"What? Why are you laughing? You guys don't know?"
Know what? As I laughed, Matthew and the in-laws looked at me quizzically. It was then that I decided to tell them the truth. My name is Madison. I was born the eldest daughter in a family of ordinary full-time working parents. I have one older brother. A perfectly normal family. At 29, I married my husband Matthew, and we had 2 children. Juggling work and child-rearing, before I knew it, I was already 55. Our son, Kenneth, and our daughter, Amelia, had grown up and become respectable members of society. They were both living on their own, struggling with their new careers. Now it was time for Matthew and me to enjoy some peace. It was a plain life, but a happy one. I had always thought we would continue to age together like this. But then, one winter day, everything changed. Dad was in a traffic accident and passed away suddenly. He was only 72 at the time. Our family was engulfed in sorrow, especially since Dad had been so healthy. Mom was particularly devastated, hardly able to eat.
"Mom, I know you're sad, but you have to eat."
I kept telling Mom this over and over.
"I know, but I just don't have an appetite. It feels like there's a lump in my chest."
My brother and I thought Mom was just going through a rough emotional patch, so we watched her for a while. But then, Mom's weight started to drop rapidly in just half a month. Worried, I decided to take her to the hospital.
"What? Cancer?"
I was stunned when the doctor diagnosed Mom with cancer. It was advanced and inoperable, and she only had about a year left. I hadn't been able to do enough for my parents yet. Just when I thought we had only lost Dad, now Mom was going through this. I was even more devastated than when Dad passed away. But there was no time to stay sad forever. My brother lived far away and couldn't be relied upon. So, it was up to me to help Mom. I immediately told Matthew that I wanted to live with Mom. I couldn't leave Mom alone, both emotionally and physically, in her illness. But Matthew's reaction was not what I expected.
What? We just finished the funeral, and now I have to deal with your parents again?
Matthew said this with a sigh, sounding annoyed.
You don't have to say it like that. Isn't it enough to just drive her to and from the hospital? Why do we have to live together? I think she'll feel lonely. If it's not okay, maybe I can live at my parents' house for a while?
I suggested. Then, Matthew said indignantly.
What? And who's going to take care of my meals then? I'll come over to cook, of course. What about cleaning? Laundry? Who's going to do all that?
I was rendered speechless. I intended to do what I could, but I couldn't handle everything as usual. His pointed remarks hurt. I couldn't argue back if someone said that my desire to help and nurse Mom was just my selfishness. I knew Mom would probably hesitate and insist that everything should stay the same. But I desperately wanted to show my filial piety.
Fine, but I'm not helping with anything, understand?
Matthew grudgingly said this to me, who was silent. Although his attitude was arrogant, he had ultimately given in.
I'm sorry, and thank you.
Even though I thought he was being quite terrible, he had agreed to my request. I held back my desire to retort and expressed my gratitude. Despite the disagreement, Matthew and I started living with Mom at my parents' home. We had been living in company housing provided by Matthew's company. Matthew was an only child. Thomas had expressed a desire to live together, so there were no plans to buy a home, and eventually, we were supposed to live in the in-laws' house. While he was still working, the company housing was more convenient for commuting, and the rent was only about $300 a month, not a significant burden. However, moving to my parents' house eliminated that expense, and the house was more spacious. I think living together wasn't all downsides for Matthew. As he had declared, Matthew didn't help with anything, but I was happy to be able to live with Mom. Mom seemed energetic, but she often felt weak and spent a lot of time lying down during the day. I prepare meals for Mom and make sure she eats them. I also arrange her medication. Doing all this alone would have been impossible for Mom.
I'm sorry, Madison. Thank you. It's a big help to have you here. I should thank Matthew too.
Mom expressed her gratitude to us many times. I hadn't told her about the harsh words Matthew had said when we decided to live together, so she seemed grateful to him as well. One evening, after Mom had gone to bed and Matthew had come home, I served him dinner and said,
"About Mom's treatment."
But Matthew glared at me and said,
"Don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear it. I told you I'm not helping."
And refused to listen. I too wanted to vent or seek advice from someone. All I wanted was for Matthew to just listen. Matthew's attitude didn't change, not after a month, nor after 2. He complained about living with my mother, acting as if he was doing a great favor by agreeing to it. His behavior became increasingly arrogant and dismissive day by day. But I couldn't really say anything in response. The stress of worrying about Mom and being considerate of Matthew was building up. Around the time when a year had passed since Mom's terminal diagnosis, her health rapidly deteriorated, and she was hospitalized. 3 days later, she passed away. Despite being mentally prepared, I was deeply saddened. My brother's family and my children rushed to support me, but in times like these, you really want your spouse by your side. However, Matthew just laughed and chatted with the in-laws in a corner, not helping with the funeral at all. My brother took on the role of the chief mourner, and we somehow managed to prepare for the funeral. But Matthew sat at the very back of the relative seats when he should be seated at the bereaved family seats.
"Matthew, I'd like you to sit in the bereaved family seats."
When I said this, Matthew replied, "No, I'm fine here.
I'm not a blood relative after all. But you are my husband."
Then Addison, who was listening to our conversation, chimed in.
He may be your husband, but he's not your mom's son, right? Matthew is my son, so he's an outsider.
That's right.
We're Matthew's only parents. You can sit in the bereaved family seats, Madison.
Hearing the in-laws say this, I fell silent. While traditions may vary by region, in our area, it's customary for sons-in-law to sit in the bereaved family seats. As expected, when relatives noticed Matthew wasn't in the bereaved family seats, I overheard whispers like,
"Did they get divorced?"
It was embarrassing, and while those gossiping were at fault too, it would have been resolved if Matthew had just sat there. I felt a bit resentful that Matthew wasn't by my side, but we managed to give Mom a proper send-off. After the funeral, we returned home with my brother's family, my children, Matthew, and the in-laws.
Thomas, Addison, thank you for coming during this busy time.
I expressed my gratitude to the in-laws and served them coffee. Then, they said, laughing, "Really though?
First your father passed away, and now your mother.
It's been quite costly for us too.
But at least it's over now."
I was stunned by their words. How could they say such things? I couldn't believe what they were saying. I forced a smile and left the room, trying my best to keep my composure. Then, as I walked away, I could hear the conversation between the in-laws and Matthew behind me.
"Matthew, it must have been hard for you, living with someone else's family." "Yeah, Madison's stubbornness was quite a challenge. You shouldn't always give in to your wife. It's okay to say no in a marriage."
I clenched my fist. Their voices, chatting and laughing, filled me with anger and frustration, but this wasn't new. The in-laws had always been insensitive and rude. When I married Matthew,
"Couldn't you have found someone more attractive?" "I worry about the grandkids' looks,"
Addison declared.
"They say beauty bores you after 3 days.
With Madison,
that's unlikely to happen,"
he said. Matthew laughed at these rude comments. It was a pattern with this family. Something in me snapped. I realized that neither the in-laws nor Matthew had ever said a word of comfort to me, not during Dad's funeral, nor after Mom passed. Instead, they mocked me. Matthew's behavior and attitude as a person started to raise questions in my mind. I thought I had been too considerate towards Matthew when all I wanted was to do something for Mom. If Matthew had been supportive towards me, it would be one thing. But he wasn't, and there was absolutely no reason for me to feel so guilty towards him. My growing anger was overshadowed by the ongoing laughter and chit-chat of the in-laws and Matthew in the background. If my brother's family or the kids had overheard them, they would have been upset, but luckily, they were all in the kitchen. I was the only one who heard their conversation since I was in a different room, which was a relief. As I was contemplating all this, Addison's voice once again reached my ears.
"Madison."
"Yes?" I turned to respond.
"Can I take this?"
Addison was holding Mom's handbag. I was perplexed, not understanding what was meant by that. Addison responded to me, saying,
"Your mom can't use it anymore, right? Matthew said it's okay to take it."
Addison was examining the bag as if appraising it. It was so disrespectful, especially right after the funeral. I took the bag away. "No, you can't."
"Huh?"
Her expression changed, showing not just anger about having the bag taken away, but also that I, her daughter-in-law, had dared to stand up to her. Despite the intensity of her expression, I stood my ground and responded with equal determination.
"We're not ready to go through Mom's belongings yet. We'll divide her things among family members later."
Addison was furious.
"What? Are you saying I'm an outsider? Didn't you just say at the funeral that even Matthew was an outsider? How does that make you family?"
I couldn't help but retort. Hearing my words, Matthew and Thomas also turned red.
"What are you saying? Apologize to Mom. How rude for a wife to say such things."
Hearing the commotion, everyone else came from the other room.
"After all the effort we put in, attending the funeral and cremation, to be called an outsider. Let's go, Thomas.
Addison yelled at me in front of everyone and left our house. Matthew, too, angrily left with the in-laws. What happened? Did you really say they were outsiders to Mom? Everyone, having heard only Addison's words, said that to me. Indeed, if only that part of the conversation was considered, it might sound like I was the one being unreasonable. However, I explained the entire situation to everyone. Not a single person blamed me.
Grandma and Grandpa should have been more considerate. Dad's just the same. They've always been like that.
My kids stood by me, but I couldn't forgive those three. Matthew didn't come home for a while. And I didn't contact him. I felt it wasn't right for me to apologize, and I wasn't ready to forgive. However, I knew I couldn't stay like this forever. One day, as I was pondering this, Matthew came home.
Welcome back.
Seeing his face reignited my anger, but I suppressed it and greeted Matthew. Then, Matthew said,
It's been tough, hasn't it?
His awkward attempt at consolation surprised me.
Take the kids on a trip. It'll be a good change of pace.
He handed me travel vouchers. I was speechless. And tears welled up. Maybe the kids had influenced him. But I was happy he went along with it. I immediately contacted my children to plan the trip. Dad did? That's unusual. They were surprised by my suggestion. It seemed to be genuinely from Matthew.
I wonder if Dad feels sorry,
I said, smiling. And so, I gratefully accepted the trip offered by Matthew. I'll be going then.
Sure. Take it easy. Why not stay at the kids' places while you're at it?
Really? I can't be away that long.
It's fine. I'll relax at my parents' house, so don't worry about me.
Matthew said this as he saw me off. Amelia was happy to have me visit, so before the trip, I went to Amelia's and then Kenneth's place. Since I hadn't been able to visit them while caring for Mom, I helped them a bit with household chores, like preparing some meals for them to freeze.
Mom, you're not really resting, are you? But it's a big help. Thank you.
Both of them were delighted to have my home-cooked meals. This was all thanks to Matthew's suggestion. Then came the long-awaited trip. I spent a relaxing time with my children at our destination. It seemed to heal the fatigue from caregiving and the sorrow of losing my parents. Although I was away for almost a week, both children returned to their homes with bright smiles.
It was fun. We should thank Dad once in a while.
Yeah, once in a while. But I wonder if he's up to something? Amelia said this with a joking tone.
Don't say that. Dad thought about it in his own way.
I laughed along with them. I planned to return home and share all these memories with Matthew, looking forward to a happy life together as a couple. But when I arrived home, I was speechless.
What's going on? Where's the house?
I looked around in disbelief, confirming my location. Despite being in a familiar place, my parents' house was gone. Then, Matthew appeared out of nowhere. The in-laws were behind him. They were wearing smug smiles, while I could only stand there.
Matthew, what's happening?
I asked Matthew, bewildered. Matthew, with a similarly unsettling smile as the in-laws, said,
Finally, the nuisance is gone. Now, it's time to live with my parents at my house. What are you talking about?
I replied calmly to Matthew's arrogant statement. Then, Matthew continued. Have you lost your mind too? Your family home has been demolished. Hurry up and bring your inheritance to my place. Whatever you inherited is ours now. I realized then. The reason our house was gone was Matthew's doing, and it was all for the inheritance. Despite having thought about the future on my way home, what a betrayal it was. I was overwhelmed with frustration and sadness. But even if they went to the lengths of demolishing the house, they wouldn't get their way. I wouldn't let them. I burst into laughter at the faces of the three, who were still sporting their smug smiles. My laughter seemed to confuse Thomas and Matthew, leaving them looking bewildered.
What? Why are you laughing? What a weird woman. Has she gone crazy?
Addison looked at me as if I were something bizarre. I faced the three of them and said,
You guys don't know?
Know what? I then told Matthew.
I didn't inherit anything at all. So there's no inheritance.
I started laughing again after saying this. They must have mistakenly thought they would become rich from the inheritance. Their baseless assumptions and actions were so ludicrous, I couldn't stop laughing.
What do you mean? Explain yourself.
Matthew demanded an explanation. But I chose to remain silent. I saw no need to enlighten them.
Before that, let me say this. I won't live with strangers. If you want to live together, do it on your own.
Instead of answering Matthew's question and refusing his initial proposal, Addison erupted in anger.
You helped your own parents with their housework, but you can't help us? You do understand there was a reason for that, right? I agreed to live together, didn't I? I said it wasn't necessary for us to live together. Have you forgotten that you chose to live together just to avoid housework?
Matthew and Addison bit their lips as I countered their arguments.
And demolishing my family home without permission, there are things you just don't do.
I reprimanded the three of them. And then left the place. Behind me, Matthew called out.
Where are you going?
His voice rang out. But I didn't turn back. I needed to find a place to sleep for the night, and I really didn't want to see Matthew's face. I immediately consulted a lawyer. It's not that easy to just demolish a house. The house was still in Mom's name. As I wondered which company had taken on the demolition, an unbelievable truth came to light. Matthew and Thomas had directly demolished the house themselves. Thomas had asked a friend who worked at a demolition machinery. It rented heavy machinery. It was all meticulously planned. Moreover, they had given me the travel vouchers to get rid of me. I felt pathetic for being so easily deceived and was incredibly angry.
Is there any way to punish these three?
I asked the lawyer with tears in my eyes. The lawyer smiled kindly at me.
For demolishing a house in your mother's name without permission, Matthew can be charged with property destruction, and you can claim damages. Let's start there and get Matthew and his parents to properly apologize.
I nodded at the lawyer's words. The lawyer then immediately began the legal process. A few days later, after learning about the situation, an enraged Matthew called me.
What's this legal notice about?
Oh, you received it?
You destroyed an important house, so naturally, you need to compensate. Compensate? We told you we were moving into our family home. We demolished a house nobody was going to live in. Instead of compensation, you should be thanking us. Now, bring whatever inheritance you have and come back home.
Matthew arrogantly retorted.
Thank you for demolishing my house without permission? Don't make me laugh. And as for bringing the inheritance, there's none to bring since I didn't inherit anything.
I shouted back at him over the phone. Matthew remained silent. It seemed he was startled by my raised voice, something unusual for me who rarely shouts. The reason I laughed when the house was demolished was precisely this. I had spent a year living with Mom. It was obvious we would have discussed inheritance. I had said to Mom, I don't need anything. Give it all to my brother. So, my brother inherited everything, including the cash and securities. Instead, he had offered me the house, saying he lived far away and couldn't manage it. If I wasn't going to live there, it could be rented out. And so, I was supposed to inherit the house.
Either you and Thomas restore the family home to its original state, or pay the amount specified in the notice. This amount! I'm being generous by offering a settlement. If you can't pay, I'll file a complaint and sue you.
I spoke firmly.
Sorry. I didn't expect you to be so angry. Of course I'm angry.
Matthew started making excuses. He had thought that if my family home remained, he couldn't live with his parents. Thomas, in particular, had been hoping to live together for a long time. He took a liking to Kenneth and seemed to want to live with him. It was Matthew who refused to live together at that time, citing the difficulty of commuting, but the in-laws seemed to be under the impression that it was I who was against it, unaware of the real reason. So, they thought demolishing my family home and taking the inheritance would force me to move in with them. However, hearing this now didn't make it any more forgivable.
So, please forgive me. I didn't mean any harm. Dad is remorseful too. If you're truly remorseful, then accept the settlement.
I said this and hung up the phone. Matthew kept calling and sending messages, apologizing.
If you're sorry, then just transfer the money quickly.
I pushed Matthew away with these words. I knew the family home couldn't be restored, but demanding compensation was the only way I could process my feelings. Afterward, I stayed at Amelia's house. My brother's family and my children were aware of the situation. Even though my brother must have been angry about the house being demolished without permission.
I won't interfere, but I'll help if you need it. Do what you think is right, Madison,
he said. Everyone condemned Matthew's actions and supported me. A month passed without any payment of the deposit or damages. And there was no contact from Matthew. I couldn't rely on Amelia forever. I wanted to get the money and at least establish a stable living situation. Contrary to my wishes, something unbelievable happened. It was revealed to me through Amelia's casual remark.
This apron looks like Grandma's, doesn't it?
Amelia said this while showing me her mobile phone screen. Upon seeing the screen, I was taken aback. It was a free market app's product page. The apron that Amelia said resembled my mom's was actually a unique one I had made for her.
How can this be? That is Grandma's apron. I made it, so I'm sure of it. What?
Amelia quickly started checking other pages. The seller seemed to have recently registered, with 0 transaction counts and ratings. There were nearly 30 items listed for sale, and to my shock, all of them belonged to Mom. I immediately realized what was happening. It was Matthew's doing. He was the only one who could have taken Mom's belongings after demolishing the house. I called Matthew right away.
What's with that app?
App? Matthew responded with an air of inconvenience. Fuming, I didn't let him play ignorant.
Don't play dumb. You're selling Mom's things, aren't you? Cancel those listings right now.
Then, Matthew seemed to panic.
What? No, it's not me. Who else would do such a thing? I'm coming over to get everything back.
I hung up and immediately headed to the in-laws' house with Amelia.
Where are Mom's belongings?
As soon as we arrived at the in-laws' house, I called out for Matthew. We were met at the entrance.
I don't know anything about it. Dad, tell the truth.
Amelia backed me up, confronting Matthew. He looked troubled. As we were talking, the in-laws noticed our presence and came out.
Oh, Amelia, you're here?
Addison seemed pleased to see Amelia. But Amelia, visibly angry, confronted her.
Grandma, tell Dad to be honest. Honest about what? It seems Dad is selling Grandma's stuff that was left when she passed away.
At Amelia's words, Addison laughed. Matthew, looking troubled, furrowed his brow and repeated.
It's really not me.
Then, Addison said loudly.
Matthew is selling them? That's impossible. But because I'm the one selling them.
I felt as if the blood had drained from my face at her words. Matthew must have known. He looked at Addison with an expression that screamed trouble. Even as Amelia stood there in shock, Addison seemed cheerful.
What did you say? It's quite a lot of work, you know? I have to pack things carefully and take good photos for the listings.
Addison talked about the app as if it were an enjoyable hobby, seemingly oblivious to the fact she was selling stolen items. Had to restrain myself from lashing out at her.
Cancel the listings. Those items aren't yours to sell.
Amelia, now red-faced and teary, pleaded with Addison. But Addison looked displeased. What's the big deal?
I've found a fun hobby. I use what I can and sell what I can't for a little pocket money. It's good for preventing dementia. Besides, I'm the only grandma left. Amelia, you want me to stay healthy and live a long life, right?
Addison said this without any hint of remorse. Even as we appealed to her to stop, she showed no signs of regret. If talking won't work, then action is the only option.
Amelia, let's go.
But
it's fine.
Let's leave. I practically dragged Amelia out of the house and went straight to the police station. Although I hadn't intended to report the demolition of the house, theft was a different matter. I explained to the police that Mom's belongings were stolen and being sold. They acted immediately, and the free market app suspended Addison's account. At least now, no more items could be sold. On the way back from the police station, I called Matthew.
I had Addison's account suspended.
You knew about this, right?
That makes you complicit. No, I've filed a report with the police. I expect you to cooperate with the investigation.
Matthew became frantic at my words.
But we're family. Please withdraw it. Family? You still haven't paid for the damage you caused to my house, and I don't see any signs of remorse.
Matthew was troubled by my angry retort. However, I wasn't heartless. Despite everything with the in-laws, there was a history with Matthew that couldn't be ignored. Sighing, I said,
I'll wait for the money, but I won't forgive the theft. Everything must be returned. Also, Thomas looked quite ill. Has he been to the hospital? What? I'm not a monster. Just make sure he gets that message,
I said, and hung up the phone. I saw Thomas for the first time in a while. He barely spoke and looked significantly thinner than just a few months ago. His complexion was beyond pale, almost ashen. It was clear he wasn't healthy. But that family seemed oblivious. Addison focused on selling stolen goods and Matthew only putting on a brave face for me. They lacked basic empathy. The next day, Thomas called me. I expected gratitude but got the opposite.
Why are you treating me like a sick person? Planning to shove me in a hospital to get rid of me? I have to protect Addison and Matthew from you. I won't go to the hospital.
He was scolding me. Here I was, concerned about him, and this was his response.
I apologize if I overstepped. I was just worried. I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents. Don't insult me.
His words irritated me, but a few days later, he apparently felt unwell enough to visit the hospital. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Matthew, in a panic, called me.
Dad's got terminal cancer. What am I going to do?
But I just snorted in response.
I don't want to hear it. Do you know what he said when I suggested going to the hospital? I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents.
Do as you please.
How can you be so heartless, Madison?
Who's the heartless one?
Did you ever say a kind word to my mom when she was sick? Reflect on your own actions.
I said this and hung up the phone. As expected, Thomas soon passed away. I didn't want to hold negative feelings towards someone who passed away, but I couldn't muster any tears for him, remembering all he had done and said. After his funeral, his will was discovered. The man who insisted he wasn't short-lived had everything meticulously planned.
The house goes to my grandson, Kenneth. The rest of the estate is to be split between my wife and eldest son.
I was surprised to hear Kenneth's name. Thomas had always favored Kenneth and wanted to live with him. Perhaps he hoped Kenneth would live in the house after he was gone. To Kenneth, this might have been an inconvenience.
You should renounce the inheritance.
You don't need that house. I advised Kenneth, but he was happy to receive it. The inheritance tax was a burden, and there seemed to be no benefit for Kenneth. However, he was pleased, so I decided not to interfere further. Kenneth inherited the house as per Thomas's will. Addison seemed pleased and paid the inheritance tax.
He's our heir, after all. It's only natural,
she said. Well, that's not incorrect. I was a bit downcast, feeling like I had lost Kenneth, but then something unbelievable happened.
Come to our place.
I received this message from Matthew and immediately went to the in-laws' house. There, like me once, stood Addison and Matthew, stunned in front of the house. In front of me, on the grounds of the in-laws' house, there was a truck with Matthew's name on it, along with employees. And there, right before my eyes, the in-laws' house was being demolished.
What's happening? It's my house. I can do whatever I want with it, right?
Kenneth, appearing out of nowhere, watched the demolition of the family home with satisfaction.
Kenneth, what are you doing? Stop this right now. Even if I stop them now, it's not like anyone can live here anymore. Kenneth, what have you done?
Addison and Matthew pleaded with Kenneth. But he just laughed.
Have you forgotten what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom? Kenneth. Grandma, did you apologize for what you did to Mom?
Kenneth's smile vanished, replaced by a piercing glare at Addison and Matthew. The two of them sank to their knees. The heavy machinery continued to noisily dismantle the in-laws' house. I finally felt a sense of relief. Later, Matthew finally paid the damages and the security deposit using the inherited assets. It turned out Kenneth had recovered the items Addison stole from Mom, and they were safely returned to me. Mom, you have me and Amelia. Don't worry. I shed tears of relief at his words. Addison and Matthew, having lost their home and with no money left, were now back in company housing. Matthew and I left the company housing. And now, returning to it with his mother, they've become the talk of the town. People are wondering what happened. I received such a message from the wife of a colleague of Matthew, who I'm on good terms with. So, I decided to tell her the whole truth, without any deception. The two of them will probably feel awkward from now on, but it's their own responsibility. Furthermore, after Matthew's resignation, the two, having lost their place to live, are now forced to economize in preparation for their new home. Occasionally, I'm considering asking my friends about how the two are faring, just for some conversation. Meanwhile, I continued to stay at Amelia's house, but then Kenneth decided to get married. He plans to build a new home. The land where the in-laws' house stood sold for a good price, which was unexpectedly beneficial.
Mom, come live with us.
Furthermore, Kenneth said that to me. His wife-to-be expressed her warm welcome to the idea, which I found very heartening. Since I couldn't stay with Amelia forever, I gratefully accepted his offer. Determined not to end up like Addison, I look forward to living happily with my new family.
I can't trust you to take care of Mom anymore.
Standing next to Georgie, who said this with a stern expression, Sophia is nodding over and over with a smug smile.
I, too, think it's better if we live with Georgie and his wife.
So, I want you to move out as soon as possible. Hearing those words, I felt my heart go cold. Anger bubbled up within me towards Sophia, who had always ordered me around, and towards Georgie and his wife, who had never lifted a finger to help. Seeing me like this, Georgie looked down on me with displeasure.
What's with that look? A disgrace who can't even properly care for Mom acting all high and mighty.
My name is Olivia. I'm 32 years old and work for a major IT company. I live at my parents' house with my father, Kevin, and my mother, Sophia, both 62 years old. I have a very good relationship with Kevin, who has a solid personality. He introduced me to fishing, a hobby of ours, and we often go fishing together on weekends. On the other hand, Sophia has a free-spirited nature. Whenever I planned to relax at home on weekends, she would suddenly barge into my room saying,
"We're going on a trip right now. Get ready immediately."
Without listening to my opinion, she'd take me on trips on a whim, which happened quite frequently. My family also includes my older brother, Georgie, who is 3 years my senior. Like Sophia, Georgie acts before thinking, so his personality clashes with my cautious nature. We fought constantly as children, resulting in a strained sibling relationship. When Georgie and I would fight, Sophia often intervened to mediate, but she has always favored Georgie, telling me I was in the wrong and that I should apologize to him. Now that we're adults, we've stopped fighting, but looking back, it feels like Sophia always preferred Georgie. Georgie ended up marrying Cindy, a colleague from his work, 5 years ago after she became pregnant. This led him to move out of the house. There had been talk of living together, but Cindy refused, so that idea fell through, leaving Kevin, Sophia, and me to live as a trio. 4 years ago, Kevin died in a truck accident while at work. The sudden loss left me emotionally unstable, unable to cope, and it took me a long time to recover. But the shock of losing Kevin was even more profound for Sophia than it was for me. Sophia, who had been a housewife, stopped doing any household chores and secluded herself in her room after the accident. Then, misfortune continued when Sophia misstepped on the house's stairs, tumbling down and suffering severe injuries. Thankfully, it wasn't life-threatening, but she became physically dependent on care. Sophia, further disheartened by her injuries, not only secluded herself in her room but also stopped eating the meals I prepared. When I saw her after a long time, she had become emaciated. Thus, believing this situation wasn't good for Sophia, I resolved to use Kevin's inheritance and my savings to build a barrier-free house that would make living easier for Sophia. The construction proceeded smoothly and, while not a mansion, a functional, barrier-free house suitable for caring for Sophia was completed. Sophia seemed to like it very much and gradually began to regain her usual cheerfulness. Moreover, she couldn't walk around freely, but she started coming out of her room, sitting on the porch to relax. Since then, I've been living busy days, juggling work, household chores, and caring for Sophia. One day after work, I came home to find Georgie and his wife visiting with their child. And the laughter of Sophia and Georgie filled the entrance.
I'm home. Oh, big brother, you're here. Welcome.
As I greeted them, Georgie, seeing me just home, said he wanted to talk. After changing from my suit into casual clothes, I headed to the living room where Georgie and the others were waiting.
What's all this formality about? What's going on?
I asked, and Georgie cheerfully responded.
We were just discussing, and we've decided to live with Mom.
So, Olivia, you need to leave this house. Despite refusing to live together when they got married, this sudden change of policy and the declaration of living with Sophia, along with the unreasonable demand for me to leave, left me unable to comprehend.
This house isn't built for 2 families. With the child and all, we won't have enough rooms. So, Olivia, you need to leave. Besides, you're 32, right? It's not good to keep relying on your parents and living at home forever.
That's right, Olivia.
How can you not see that you're being a burden to Sophia? As an adult, you should have realized this without us having to say anything. It's time to stop depending on your parents and become independent.
While I was being unilaterally criticized by Georgie and Cindy, I wanted to argue that I wasn't actually depending on my parents.
To be honest, I've always wanted to live with Georgie and the rest. He's our precious eldest son, after all. And Olivia, you've always been so cautious and slow. It's been frustrating to watch. Plus, I could never tell what you were thinking, which was creepy.
Sophia suddenly came out with her desire to live with Georgie and their family and revealed what she really thought of me.
Besides, even now, Olivia, you hardly do any housework because you're always busy with work. There's no point in living with Olivia, who is useless. Now that Georgie and his family have said they'll live with me, you should quickly pack your things and leave.
Sophia saw me not as a family member but merely as a convenient housekeeper. Due to my work commitments and coming home late during busy periods, I couldn't adequately keep up with household chores, prompting the suggestion that I leave. I could forgive the harsh words from Georgie and Cindy, but Sophia's words deeply wounded me. Since Kevin passed away, I've struggled to support Sophia, pushing through my fatigue after work to take care of the household and provide care for Sophia. Moreover, Georgie and his wife were living far from the house, so I couldn't rely on them for support. Additionally, my workplace is a bit far from home, requiring a considerable commute time. My job does not accommodate remote work, so I commute daily by train. I had thought many times about moving closer to my company after Kevin died. Yet, despite Sophia's profound grief over losing Kevin and her need for care, I chose to support her. But to her, it seems I was just a housekeeper. Feeling betrayed by Sophia, sadness and anger began to swell within me.
Busy with work and can't even take proper care of Mom, huh? Really, you're such a disgrace. You're failing as a family member. Stop half-assing it and just pack your bags and leave if you're that incompetent.
Hey, Georgie, don't you think calling her a failure as a family member is too much? Don't worry, Olivia. We'll live together and take perfect care of Sophia, just you watch.
Oh, Cindy, that's so reassuring. Unlike Olivia, you make me feel secure. This is how a family should be.
These words from Georgie and the others unleashed the pent-up anger and sadness within me.
Understood. I'll get everything sorted and leave you to your freedom.
Suppressing various emotions, I said just that and returned to my room. As I ascended the stairs to my room, the voices of Sophia and the others, gossiping about me, could still be heard from the living room. It seemed I was the only one who thought of us as a family. It appeared the others did not consider me part of theirs. Realizing this, the suppressed feelings of anger, sadness, and frustration came flooding back. After entering my room and closing the door, I decided to make a significant phone call, harboring strong emotions. 2 weeks after I left the house, I received a call from Georgie.
Hey. Mom isn't doing any household chores at all. What's going on?
According to Georgie, Sophia wasn't taking care of the house or the children at all, leaving them in a bind. I had assumed this would be the case since Sophia hadn't been doing chores even when I was living there, but it seems Cindy had different expectations. It turns out Cindy had hoped that, despite needing some care, Sophia's condition wasn't serious and that she could handle household chores and look after the grandchildren, allowing Cindy to take it easy. I couldn't help but feel astounded by Cindy's overly optimistic thinking and Georgie's complaints despite agreeing to it so readily.
There was no way living together and relying on Mom from the start was going to work. Plus, we knew she needed care all along. What are you complaining about now? I wasn't told she couldn't move around this much.
Georgie came up with excuses like a child.
And that's not all. People claiming to be from a real estate and construction company have been showing up, asking to see the house, causing us trouble. They're probably scammers, so we've been ignoring them. But they've been sending letters for a while, showing up at the house, and even calling. It's getting really annoying.
Georgie said this in frustration, and I calmly replied,
Oh, that's because I hired a professional service. I've sold the house, so you'll need to move out soon. What? Why are you selling Mom's house without permission? It's our house, don't mess around.
I ignored Georgie's yelling and explained that Sophia was already informed.
Why do you think the house I paid to build is Mom's, let alone yours? I built it, so it's my right to sell it. The buyer wants to demolish it and the surrounding land to build condominiums. They were thrilled to buy it. Why would you do something like that on your own? We're living there right now. Is this how you treat family? Who was it that said to leave because I was useless? Besides, it's my house that I bought, so I can do whatever I want with it.
As I countered Georgie, who tended to ignore inconvenient truths, he seemed to run out of arguments. Georgie suddenly changed his tone, pleading with me in a different voice.
Please! We were wrong! So, stop selling the house and cancel the demolition. Talk to the company and convince them to stop. I'll even let you live here. We'll make the rent cheap and even do some of the housework. How about that? It's not a bad deal, right? I'm saying we'll welcome you back into the family.
Even in this situation, Georgie seemed not to understand his position at all. Despite it being the house I bought, he's talking about charging me rent, assuming I'd do the housework, and saying they'd welcome me back into the family. I was utterly astounded by Georgie's arrogant remarks, informed him that a buyer had already been found and that the sale wouldn't be reversed, and he should leave the house without causing any more trouble for the company, then hung up. Georgie called again shortly after, but I blocked his number. Soon after, I received messages from both Cindy and Sophia, blaming me and asking to stop the sale of the house, but I replied with rejections to both and decided to block Sophia and Georgie's contacts, resolved never to see them again. A colleague who lives near the house I had built later told me about Sophia and Georgie's situation. After our call, the contractors moved in quickly to start demolishing the house. Sophia and the Georgies resisted until the end, trying to prevent the contractors from entering and spreading malicious rumors about illegal construction in the neighborhood, continuing their harassment and interference. I had warned the contractors in advance that these people were difficult and might cause trouble, so they were somewhat prepared. However, overwhelmed by the severity of their malicious harassment, the contractors reached their limit and threatened to call the police if the harassment and interference continued. Faced with cold stares from those looking forward to the new condominium and the mention of the police, Sophia and Georgie stopped their resistance and ceased their harassment. Demolition progressed smoothly after that, and Sophia and Georgie, having lost their house, hastily rented a small apartment nearby. However, Sophia continued not to do any housework or care for the children, and Cindy had to take on both household chores and care. Frustrations in living with Sophia accumulated, leading to daily arguments loud enough for the neighbors to hear. When Cindy could no longer bear it and sought Georgie's advice, he kept avoiding the issue, too busy with work to listen properly. Eventually, Cindy reached her limit and, one night while everyone was asleep, took the children and left Sophia and Georgie's place for good. Georgie frantically tried to contact Cindy but couldn't reach her, finding only a completed divorce application left behind. The apartment they hastily moved into was chosen in a rush, prioritizing speed without properly checking the interior or specifying detailed conditions. As a result, the living situation became difficult for Sophia, who needed care. After Cindy left, Sophia reluctantly began to do household chores but couldn't manage everything due to her injuries. Georgie also started doing household chores out of necessity, but having never done them before, the quality was terrible, leading to daily arguments with Sophia. Georgie, having been left by his wife and children and returning home tired from work, faced the stress of unfamiliar chores and caring for Sophia, appearing older than his actual age and becoming isolated at work. Originally, Georgie had an outgoing personality like Sophia's, with many friends and a fulfilling private life, but his mental state deteriorated due to his current lifestyle, leading to harsh behavior. Gradually, he lost friends and was avoided at work, becoming lonely. Moreover, Sophia has been looking for me recently, shouting my name around the house, becoming the talk of the neighborhood, as a colleague mentioned. As for me, I am now living abroad. My boss had always wanted me to go to our overseas branch, but I had declined due to caring for Sophia, who needed assistance. However, after being driven out of the house, I accepted the overseas transfer without hesitation and left for America. Life in a new environment is full of exciting new challenges. And while it requires a different perspective from America, I find it very rewarding. Before leaving America, a colleague who had long harbored feelings for me confessed, and we started dating. Though we are in a long-distance relationship, we found in each other the best partner to encourage and elevate one another. He proposed that we get married when I return to America, so I eagerly await my return, fully committed to my work. Freed from the troubling relationships of the past, I am savoring happiness and living fulfilling days.
I want to marry Thomas the doctor, so please divorce him, old woman.
One day, a young woman suddenly showed up at our house and said, Elizabeth, a bar girl who is 12 years younger than me, was leaning on my husband Thomas's arm as if seeking his affection.
Sure, but there's one condition,
I said with a smile, looking at both of them.
I'll file for divorce right in front of you. So, will you apply for your marriage certificate in front of me?
The two, momentarily confused by what was said, accepted with a smug smile. Trying not to burst into laughter, I headed to the family court with them to submit the divorce application. My name is Amelia. I'm 34 years old and work as an internist at a hospital. My husband Thomas, who is the same age, also works at the same hospital. Since we both have night shifts, our days off rarely coincide, and we don't have any children yet. While we used to get comments about grandchildren from my parents and parents-in-law, they've pretty much stopped now. Given our busy schedules and the possibility of being called into work unexpectedly, they seem to have accepted that grandchildren are off the table as long as I work at this hospital. Though I feel a bit guilty towards our parents, I find my job very fulfilling. Thomas likes his job too and occasionally attends skill upgrade training sessions. His hard work is well regarded in the hospital, and despite our busy schedules, we lead fulfilling lives. My discontent with Thomas began when the rules we set at the beginning of our marriage started to be ignored. Given our demanding jobs, we had clearly set some rules regarding household chores. One of them was that the person not on night shift would take care of the chores. Since our night shifts are irregular, it's difficult to divide the chores by day or type. Therefore, we decided to base it on the presence or absence of night shifts. Until now, if I was on a night shift, Thomas would cook simple meals and take care of cleaning and laundry. However, lately, even when he's not on night shift, Thomas is often out at night.
Hey, have you been leaving the house more often, even on nights you're not working?
Yeah. Sorry, I've been invited out for drinks a lot lately because the instructor seems to like me.
I used to decline, but it felt bad to always say no, and after I accepted once, the invitations just kept coming.
Sorry. I'll try to reduce the frequency. Indeed, the hospital is hosting various training sessions at this time, some of which involve external instructors, I remembered, patting Thomas on the shoulder.
It's fine. It means you're just that wanted, right? Plus, the training sessions are only for about 2 more weeks. Don't worry about the house and just do your best.
Sorry, that helps a lot. Thomas is a good listener, which often leads me to share many things with him. It made sense why he was favored by the instructor. Though Thomas said he would use his own allowance for the drinking parties, at that rate, it would quickly run out. So, I decided to cover the expenses for the next 2 weeks from our living expenses. For the next 2 weeks, Thomas started going out at night whenever there were training sessions. Even after the training ended, the night outings continued. I thought he was busy with night shifts, but Ms. Brown, a veteran janitor, told me that wasn't the case.
Thomas hasn't been doing many night shifts lately. We'd prefer to leave it to the men, especially since we have many older staff in our department.
It turned out Thomas was going out at night even when he wasn't on night shift. Just when I was about to confront him, my schedule got so hectic that I didn't have the time to question him. By the time my schedule calmed down, I no longer felt like confronting Thomas. All I wanted was to come home and sleep in my bed. Exhausted, when I returned home after a night shift, there was an unfamiliar woman's umbrella at our house.
I'm home. Thomas, do we have a guest?
Welcome back. Sorry for the suddenness, but there's something we need to talk about. As I walked into the living room, I saw Thomas sitting on the sofa, with an unknown woman next to him. The woman, who looked like a college student, was snuggling up to Thomas.
Can I leave my bag here?
Yeah, that's fine. But I hope you can make it quick. The atmosphere clearly indicated it wasn't a good conversation, so I sighed and went to leave my belongings in the room. Without changing, I returned to the living room in my work clothes and sat on the sofa facing Thomas and the woman.
I believe this is our first meeting. What brings you here today? Nice to meet you. I'm Elizabeth. I came here today because I want you to divorce Thomas, old woman.
More than being called old woman by someone I just met, it was her lisping speech that irked me. Holding back my confusion, I looked at Thomas, who seemed flustered for a moment but then met my gaze firmly.
Elizabeth works at the bar where I went with the instructor. She's a college student working part-time to pay for her tuition, a very earnest girl. A college student? No offense, but how old are you? Are you even over 21? I'm 22. Old woman and I have a 12-year gap. Interesting, isn't it?
I wanted to challenge her comment about being interesting, but resigned myself to glaring at Thomas.
So, you cheat on me while I'm busy and now want to marry a younger girl and ask for a divorce, is that it? Why do you have to say it like it's something bad? I just want to protect Elizabeth for the rest of my life. You can live on your own, but Elizabeth needs me. Thomas, that's so cool.
Watching them engage in affectionate gestures before me made me sigh. Thomas was completely smitten by Elizabeth, finding everything she said adorable, which was incredibly annoying. Every time I called Elizabeth's name, she looked at me with a triumphant, smug smile.
Do you really want to marry this man? A man who goes to bars while married, brags, and lies. A man who takes the sales talk of bars seriously. Are you sure you won't regret it? Of course I want to marry him. After all, Thomas is a doctor and earns a lot. It's terrible to accuse him of lying. He's promised to stop going to bars once we're married. Thomas and I are in love, so it'll be fine.
Hearing this, Thomas hugged Elizabeth as if moved, and they once again retreated into their own world. I stared at Thomas in disbelief, but our eyes never met.
All right then. If you two have decided on that, I'll divorce you. But there's a condition. What's the condition? Division of assets?
At Thomas's words, I shook my head no, and then looked at them with a smile.
We're going to the family court together. I want Elizabeth to witness Thomas and I submitting our divorce application. After the divorce application is accepted, I want you two to apply for your marriage certificate in front of me.
That's all. The two, initially confused by what was said, stood up delighted when they realized that was the only condition. Then, the three of us headed to the family court. At the family court, Thomas and I first submitted our divorce application. I made a somewhat unreasonable request to the staff to expedite the process as much as possible. Later, when the divorce application was accepted, we went to the state office, where Thomas and Elizabeth applied for their marriage certificate. I helped them fill out the application forms and advised them on the necessary identification documents, all the while feeling the curious glances from those around us. The atmosphere of an ex-wife helping the new wife with the paperwork felt awkward, and the staff deliberately avoided looking at us. I felt a bit guilty, but I couldn't help feeling good about myself. Then, I returned home and moved all my belongings to my parents' house. Since I hardly ever shopped due to my demanding job and left the household items behind, there wasn't much to move except for valuables and clothes. I managed to pack everything into suitcases and moved out by car in less than a day. When I got back to my parents' house, they were furious with Thomas, but I calmed them down with a smile.
Don't worry. I'm not letting this go. I'll make sure both of them end up in a miserable situation.
3 days later, I was called to a meeting room through an internal phone line at the hospital reception.
A woman is here insisting on seeing the doctor. What should I do? Please direct her to an available room. I'll come over as soon as I finish my consultation.
When I arrived at the designated meeting room, unsurprisingly, it was Elizabeth. She was taken aback upon seeing me in my lab coat.
Hello. I've managed to spare 5 minutes between consultations, so let's make this quick, shall we? What do you mean? He wasn't a doctor, and you are, eh?
Elizabeth was panicking, but I didn't have the time to calm her down. I informed Elizabeth with a smile.
Indeed, Thomas works at this hospital, but he is a janitor. He's responsible for everything from cleaning to disinfection, a valued staff member.
What? He lied to me. Elizabeth slammed her fist on the meeting room table, ranting about Thomas. Didn't you listen? I told you, Thomas is a man who brags and lies about his status. Life might be tough from now on, but good luck.
This is a joke. If he's not a doctor, I don't need such a man.
I waved goodbye to the nearly explosive Elizabeth and left the meeting room. I heard her trying to stop me, but I rushed back to my consultation room with full speed. After exchanging high fives with the nurses who knew the situation, I calmed down and called in the next patient. Later, Elizabeth found Thomas working in the hospital and demanded a divorce. Elizabeth shouted that there was no point in being married if he wasn't a doctor, while Thomas loudly claimed that love doesn't care about professions. The spectacle was witnessed by waiting patients and nurses, quickly becoming the talk of the hospital. Despite whispers from onlookers, the heated argument between the two didn't subside until security had to intervene, nearly leading to police involvement. Elizabeth stormed out of the hospital, and Thomas followed her. Elizabeth returned home and caused a neighborhood disturbance by screaming at Thomas to divorce her and claiming the house, along with demanding compensation for being deceived. Around the time our divorce became known in the hospital, I filed for compensation against both of them for the affair. Thomas and Elizabeth came to my parents' house immediately after receiving the letter from the lawyer.
What the heck is this about demanding compensation? You didn't set any conditions other than remarrying Elizabeth. Why are you demanding compensation now?
They barged into the house without hesitation, ranting in front of my parents.
Well, Thomas, you cheated on me while we were married, and you, Elizabeth, knew he was married and still had an affair with him, right? So, of course, I'm going to demand compensation from both of you. Don't be ridiculous. It's not my fault. I won't pay a cent. You're so greedy even though you're a doctor. Your nature is so vile.
Their yelling didn't bother me at all.
Do you know why I included your remarriage in the divorce conditions?
Thomas and Elizabeth looked puzzled.
One reason is to make it clear that Thomas was having an affair while married to me. Normally, getting remarried just a few weeks after a divorce screams that the person was the affair partner. Though you didn't need to do that since you made a scene at the hospital and everyone already knows. The other reason is to ensure I could definitely get compensation from you. I thought Elizabeth was a fake name you used at the bar, and I had no idea where you worked or who you really were. So, I had you fill out the marriage certificate application and helped you with the process. Thanks to that, I got to see all your identification documents. Oh, and when you get married, you have to change your name and address on your driver's license, you know.
While Thomas frowned, Elizabeth's face turned paler.
So, I'll leave the rest to the lawyer. You can try to dodge or run, but don't forget I have all your personal information.
Elizabeth, who works in a bar, must understand the importance of protecting personal information, as it could easily lead to her being stalked. As I smiled, Elizabeth ran off with heavy footsteps. Thomas, looking dumbfounded but irritated at me, followed after Elizabeth. In the now quiet house, I sighed and soothed my angry parents. Elizabeth has been paying the compensation smoothly. Considering she's a college student, I proposed a modest amount, so she should be able to finish paying within the year. Though she wants to divorce Thomas, he's resisting, and neither of them can afford a lawyer for divorce negotiations. Thus, they're separated but not yet divorced. It was also her fault for believing Thomas was a doctor just because she saw a family name similar to his on the hospital's medical staff list. Even though she's still a college student, working in customer service means she should know better than to blur the lines between customers and employees. Perhaps for her, a wealthy doctor was an ideal marriage candidate, but having an affair with a married man was wrong. Even if Thomas agrees to a divorce in the future, she'll have a divorce record. This incident has likely taught her a lesson that destroying someone's family carelessly can lead to dire consequences for herself. As for Thomas, he disappeared from the hospital without me having to do anything. In fact, Thomas, who had left the hospital to follow Elizabeth after she was expelled that day, was in the middle of his shift. As a result, Ms. Brown, a veteran janitor and Thomas's supervisor, was furious. With her face red with anger, she wrote in large letters on Thomas's work schedule that he was absent without permission due to a romantic entanglement. Thanks to that, even the janitors who were off that day came to know about it. Among the staff, that uproar became a major incident, and the patients spread rumors among themselves. As a result, Thomas was the subject of both true and false accusations and ended up being ostracized by everyone, ignored even in greetings, which seemed to break his spirit. One day, he suddenly resigned on his own. Afterward, he apparently returned to his father-in-law house, where his father-in-law, who was already informed of the situation, scolded him severely. There was no apology from Thomas, but I decided not to worry about it anymore since the full amount of compensation I had demanded was deposited by my mother-in-law. In the hospital, I received approaches from male doctors and nurses who heard I was single again, but I declined all of them, thinking I'm okay without marriage for a while. I continue to work as an internist, busy but dedicating time to each of my patients.